One of Education Minister Naftali Bennett's many criticisms of the government recently is that they've allowed a sense of over-legislation in the army. That is to say that our soldiers are more afraid of the military advocate general than they are of the military commander of Hamas. Well, Bennett is coming under fire for these comments, and joining me now, perhaps with some reasons, is Dr. Martin Sherman, the founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies. Dr. Sherman, thank you for coming back in today.
Thank you for having me again.
All right, so first of all, this goes back to, the so-called Azari effect, the Alor Azari effect, which goes to, former soldier Alor Azaria, who shot an unarmed and disabled Palestinian terrorist in the head. So, he was sued, and so now we're talking about this. But that's not a real thing, according to polls and according to senior officials. So why is Bennett saying that?
Well, I'm not sure you're right about that. I think I just saw a poll this morning which shows that the public have a very dim view of the over-legalization and the judicialization of many fields of life in Israel. And I think it shows a growing disconnect between the public and the legal establishment. If the legal environment doesn't reflect the prevailing values and mores of the society, you're going to find people sort of losing trust in it. And in fact, there's a lot of evidence. There's been an ongoing study that shows that there's an eroding level of trust in the judiciary, the courts, etc., etc. I think it's very dangerous.
But so first of all, polls and studies like that are saying similar things worldwide, actually, these days. But more importantly, here, I want to press you on that. What evidence is there that the judiciary really is not following the will of the public, because they're still demolishing houses just like the public
wants? Well, not really. I mean, if you look what's happened with the house of the terrorists in the Balkan, they haven't demolished anything, and they're only partially demolishing, which really seems a bit like splitting hairs. There hasn't been. There are a lot of houses that haven't been demolished. I think it was one of the major complaints against Lieberman, that he hadn't been able to push through the demolition of houses. And if there's too much of a gap between the act and the punishment loses its effect. I mean, there seems to be a sort of a very strange double standard between the way Israel's military actions or coercive actions are judged and elsewhere. I think it was in 1996 when on 60 Minutes, when Leslie Stahl interviewed Madeleine Albright, if you remember. She was Bill Clinton's ambassador to the UN and then later Secretary of State. And Stahl asked her, about the effect of American sanctions on of UN sanctions, American-led UN sanctions on Iraq at that time. And she said, we've heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more than children that died in Hiroshima. And, is the price worth it? And Albright responded, I think this is a very difficult choice, but the price we think is worth it.
But what does that have to do? I mean, how many cases of legislation taken against single soldiers has there really been? Because that's what he's talking about here in these comments. He's saying that an individual soldier is afraid to act properly in the field because he's afraid of legislation later.
Well, as I say, there is an atmosphere that, the comparison was, every soldier needs a lawyer. Because instead of allowing greater discretion, greater operational discretion, the army has become constrained by fear, not so much of legislation that's been enacted, but fear of legislation that may be enacted. And if you look at what happened, for instance, in the I think it was 2002 Jenin operation, where instead of using air power, they put foot soldiers in and lost 13 soldiers because of fear that using air power may not have been in accordance with the prevailing legal atmosphere. So I think there is. I mean, look, I'm not advocating allowing the army to open up deliberately on civilians, but I don't think that enemy civilian casualties are a operational constraint. If casualties are going to prevent the operation or are going to greatly endanger Israeli lives, I don't think that can be a consideration. I mean, at some stage there should be some common sense should kick in.
Well, I'd like to believe that if soldiers in any military, but especially in the IDF, were conducting themselves under the appropriate guidelines of war in whatever situation that they were in, that they wouldn't have to fear from legal recourse. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Dr. Sherman, thank you so much for coming in.
Next time maybe we can talk about how NATO behaved in Kosovo.
Next time. Thank you so much, Dr. Sherman.
Okay.